we have audio now, sir?
Yeah.
Do you want to repeat your public comment, because it was kind of an announcement?
Yeah, so no one heard any of what would precede this moment? Yeah, I would like to read it again. So again, this is an abbreviated read of the media release from the Holliston Police Department in regards to a house fire yesterday, a significant event. On Sunday, March 8th, 2020, at approximately 5:45 a.m., the Holliston Police Department received an E911 call reporting a house fire on Carl Road. Upon arrival, Holliston police officers observed heavy smoke billowing from the home and heard residents yelling from a small window located above an attached garage. A quick assessment by the officers on scene determined that the entry into the home through the front door was going to be impossible based on the heavy smoke and flames. Officers were able to locate a ladder on the property, and both officers climbed onto the roof of the garage. The two residents were then brought down to the ground via ladder for treatment and transport. Both residents were eventually transported to Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston for further treatment. Two Holliston police officers were transported to Metro West Medical Center in Framingham for evaluation and smoke inhalation. Both officers were treated and released from the hospital on Sunday, March 8th, and are resting comfortably at home. One member of the Holliston Fire Department was treated at the scene for a minor hand injury. The actions of the Holliston Police and Fire Department were instrumental in rescuing two Holliston residents on Sunday morning. Both of our officers and the Holliston Fire Department should be recognized and honored for their actions and exemplify what it means to be a first responder and a Holliston police officer and a Holliston Fire Department member. Officers perform exceptional work here in Holliston every day, and this is a shining example of our officers taking swift action to help save lives. The origin and case of the fire remains under investigation.
And as Jeff pointed out, the EMTs were excellent that day as well. Thank you for reading that.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have anyone from the audience that would like to come up and make a public comment about anything you want to talk about at all? Come on up.
Mm-hmm.
You want to come
Yeah,
up
you can have a
again?
seat.
We don't bite.
We have a couple.
We won't
I
bite
think we
you.
have a few people.
I'm not a public comment, am
No, you're on
I?
the agenda.
Oh,
Do you have something to say?
I think Beth
If I
does.
could.
Absolutely. Come on up.
All right.
Name
My name's Bob Malone. I live at 414 Central Street. I'm the chair of the Council on Aging, and I'm here to, in public comment, to ask the board's help in trying to fill the one vacant seat that we have on the board. It's a 7-member board. We've been trying to fill it internally through senior center purposes. We've not been terribly successful. But if the board publicizes the vacancy, we're hopeful that perhaps you might get some interested candidates. We'd be delighted to have somebody.
Criteria, Bob?
The only requirement is either some knowledge of or an interest in learning about senior issues. Other than that, no other requirements.
Must be a citizen of.
Citizen of the town of Holliston. There's no age requirement.
Excellent.
So we'd appreciate your help in trying to fill that slot.
We will help you, won't we,
Thank you.
Jeff?
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Come on up.
So, Beth Hoffer, I'm from 184 Winthrop Street,
Okay.
and I'm here, I'd like to speak a little bit about the water filtration project, if I could.
Sure.
And I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but I need to give you a little bit of background, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Because it's not like I just suddenly sat down and started talking. I've been living in my house for a good 20 years and living with the water there. And I understand that a lot of people are, have the same problem, have problems with the water. But some of the houses have more of a problem than others. And I happen to be one of those houses. And I'm getting to the point that I honestly don't think I can keep going on. So it's really affecting my quality of life, my wallet, my carbon footprint. And there's also some health implications as well. So the town did recognize that I had one of the more serious problems. They installed a whole house water filter for me, which I am grateful for. But it does not take care of all of the problems. So this shows you what comes out of my water. That's the water filter. After 3 months, that's a 6-month water filter on average, and it's being used much less than average. I actually changed the filter today, and the first time the toilet was flushed, the bowl and the tank filled up with black water, not gray water, not black. And I didn't think you wanted to see a photo of the inside of my toilet, so I didn't do that.
Well, this surely was enough.
Well, and then here's a picture of what it looks like new.
Then filter.
Yeah, that's how it starts. It starts white. And the other thing that happens even with the filter in place is that there's all this grit and sediment and everything else that gets left behind. I cannot use my water. So, and it would be nice if I could have use a shower head filter, but it's a 6 to 9 month filter with the whole house filter in place that lasts 3 weeks.
You
And
want to pass this around so the residents can see it?
And I cannot afford to replace that filter every 3 weeks. As it is, I'm replacing the whole house filter more often than I should be, and the one on my kitchen faucet, and I'm buying bottled water. So, a few years ago, I had been in contact with Mr. Reese, and he explained that this water filtration plant was in the offing, that it was going to get on the next town meeting agenda, and then it would be about 2.5 years after that for completion of the facility. So it didn't get on the next agenda or the one after that. So 1.5 years later, it finally got on town meeting, okay? Fine. So then he had said it'd be about 2.5 years. So I thought, okay, I'm in the home stretch now. It's gonna be about 2.5 more years. So that was in May of 2018 that the money was appropriated. In May in 2019, I said, oh, I'll go on, it's been a year, and check the project on the town website, and there was no information, and I started asking questions, and I found out that was because nothing's been done. So now I'm being told that the ground is we're gonna break ground in November 2021, which is 3.5 years after the money's been appropriated. I've never put together a water treatment facility, but 3.5 years of planning to me seems excessive. I don't know, it may not be, but it seems excessive. I do know, and I know it's not apples and apples, but the report I read about the police station, it was 2.5 years from the time the money was appropriated to when they opened the doors. And I know it's not the same thing, but they had a hazmat situation, they had technology to put in. And I also think some planning must have been done, am I correct? Because you came up with an $8.5 million price tag. So there had to have been some planning done, correct?
Of course, yeah.
So I don't really understand why it's going to be 3.5 years and then another 2.5 years from the time the money was appropriated. I can't go on like this.
My understanding was that it was going to be started this year.
Oh, well.
That's what my understanding was.
Okay, so, because I
So,
think you
Um,
had shared with me that November 2021, so that's why I thought.
I mean, my understanding was originally that it was going to start.
Well, I think the planning's being
I
started.
know there was a
now.
lot of engineering work that was done, but my understanding was that we were going to break ground this year, is what my memory
Well,
is.
that would be like good.
So why don't we get some definitive answers
Okay,
for
and
you?
the other thing too is if you're breaking ground in November, I mean, it'd be great if we have another winter like this, no problem, but
Yeah.
it just seems like if we have an average New England winter, that could cause delays and increased cost.
The only thing I can think of is that maybe there was an issue with procurement
But
settling on someone, but I don't recall
Have
that.
we even gone out to bid yet,
I
though?
don't recall that being an issue.
I mean, I don't think we've even like gotten,
No.
I mean, I don't know.
No,
But
it's still
I
in the
would think-
engineering phase. It's expected to come online in November of '21. But.
Oh, it's
Mr.
gonna come online in
That's what
November
we've been told,
2021.
But we can ask Mr. Reese.
Well, no, that's much better. I thought you were breaking ground, and I'm sorry to
No,
waste
my
your time.
understanding.
No, you need an
was-
update. It's important that you get an update.
Well
I think
before
it's a project that affects more than just,
I-
one citizen. It is a significant investment. And I think, given the timeliness of the upcoming special, annual town meeting, Mr. Rooney, maybe we should have Mr. Reese come in and give people an update on what he's been doing with the project and
Absolutely.
when we can expect it to
Yeah.
start filtering water for residents.
And I think also get some definitive answers for the resident as well as have that presentation.
Well,
at
I'm
town
just
meeting. And I
wondering-
can tell you, I fought real hard to get more funding at town meeting. I don't know if you were there in October, but I got up in front of everyone to plead with the residents to, this is an issue. It's not, something that's sexy that you would buy like a new car. It's something we're already supposed to have.
Yeah,
And as I pointed out at town meeting, and I'll say right now, the can was kicked down the road 40 years ago. Pipes were supposed to be changed. And we need to get this done. And there's no question about it. It's,
okay, so, and
really
this,
an issue.
just one other thing I was gonna mention is that I understand that the EPA has awarded Massachusetts over $80 million for the betterment of drinking water. And I understand that we did make a grant, and it was denied, so I was just wondering if you know the reason for the denial?
Well, one of the things we're gonna try to do is when we bond that project, we're going to make use of a state borrowing program to offset it. It's a very low interest program.
But you have to apply for it, right?
That's
So-
correct.
So
Yeah.
we haven't applied for it yet then?
No, that's gonna be part of the, like you said, the bidding process. So
Okay,
that's all
so I mean,
addition.
I'm getting information from different places, so obviously I
No, and I think you're spot on. I think you and others deserve like one answer. The clear, the path ahead, if you will, and I support Mr.
I'll try to
Rooney's
make
idea.
it, but I'm really,
No, I
and
feel
I
the
don't
same
know, I
boat
mean, if
are.
you do talk to mysteries, I don't know if there's some reason it's all ending up at my house. I mean, if, maybe there's something, a
It's not
valve
just your
that's
house.
with the sludge though?
There's
Hard to know.
people
There are many people with those
Okay,
with
just
issues.
filtration
asbestos.
systems, but they're not meant to be solutions. They're, until we get the treatment plant, that's really all
Yeah.
we can do.
Okay.
Jeff, when you talked to Sean about him presenting here before the board with a timeline, could you also have him outline pending articles so that Beth can follow along? I think that's something you're asking for too, is when to pay attention to town meeting votes, to
Wait.
follow, to track.
Well, everything is in place for the project
The
to move
money's in
forward.
place,
Yeah,
right?
everything's ready to go.
So if there are no pending articles that
There are
need
no
to go-
pending articles for this. No, it's in the design phase.
What you might be thinking of, Tina, is we were talking at one point about whether or not to put it on the Springtown meeting warrant as a debt exclusion item, or if we're just gonna pay it out of water
Surplus.
resource. Yeah, we,
But I mean, we appropriated $8.5 million,
correct. That's correct.
so it's been.
Now the mechanism, like, how do we borrow that?
Okay,
It's a,
but we don't need to go back to town meeting to do
No.
that?
not to borrow. No.
Okay,
Well, the question only is, if we choose to put it above our levy limit, we need a debt exclusion override vote for it.
like an override that people have to vote for?
That's correct.
Oh.
Yeah,
If
or
we-
not.
if we
We're,
need to.
we're exploring using the water surplus fund to pay for it.
Well, but also if you, it's like a zero interest loan, isn't it, from the state?
That's what I just, yeah, it's
Oh,
a very
that's what you're
favorable
talking about.
loan,
Okay.
once you get the funding for it.
Okay.
But more on that later. Could I ask one follow-up
Absolutely.
question? You used the H word there, and I just wanted to follow up.
I'm sorry, what?
You said it's affecting your health.
Well, I mean, there's future, I mean, we have no idea. And also because I'm using so much of the bottled, the gallons of plastic water, and they say you're not, the chemicals from the plastic leach into the water. And I'm using that for cooking and stuff, so we have no idea exactly. I
Okay.
just don't think it's good.
Okay, all right,
I
thank
have
you.
black water.
Very
okay?
good.
But thank you.
Thank
for
you.
inquiring. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for your time.
Okay. Any other public comments from anyone at all? Please come up. No? All right, next on the list is the Garden Club. Please come up.
Hello, I'm
And
Carol
then you can-
Howley. I live at 78 Briarcliff Lane.
Can you pull the mic a little closer to you and just repeat yourself so people can hear?
How's that?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Carol Howley. I live at 78 Briarcliff Lane in town, and I'm a member of the Holliston Garden Club, and that's who I'm representing tonight. Every year, just about, we plant an Arbor Day tree in town, and we have to ask permission from the town to do that. So I'm here asking permission to plant 2 trees this year. And the area where we'd like to plant the trees is in front of the cemetery. There's already a row of 4 stellar pink dogwoods there. And at the end, closest to the town hall, there's space, it looks like, for 2 more trees. Did you
Nice.
happen to look at it, Mark?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
there
so
was
we-
some
To that.
masses of forsythia that were taken out there.
Well, this is actually bare.
Yeah.
ground,
Yeah,
nothing
well,
there.
we removed those for.
Oh,
some
that's
reason.
why there's a space there.
Right.
Okay, great. So we would like permission to plant 2 trees there that we will pay for, and we will care for and water with the town water from the town hall.
And you want a little help from the highway department, you said?
We would like the town to please dig the holes and leave the dirt this time because they didn't leave it when we planted the other 6 trees.
Okay,
So be sure to, and make the holes big enough. These are 10-gallon pots the trees are in.
okay,
They're about 7 feet tall. So we need a good size hole.
all right.
And we'll take care of the amendments, the watering and the planting. And if they could do that by April 10th, that gives us 2 weeks then to get some people together to plant the trees and have them ready before Arbor Day.
Great. And those water bags you used, they work pretty well, actually.
You know,
But they do break in time.
They disintegrate within a year. It's really better to
But
bring our
but
water
that
there.
first year, though, is critical,
Well,
so.
we have a committee that will be going over and watering 2 or 3 times a week
Right, okay,
in the beginning because we want to make sure that the trees thrive.
right.
Let's see, are you going to have the water turned on by then on the side of the town hall?
Oh, we can look into that,
Whatever you'd like.
whatever you
If
want.
it could be turned on by April 10th, that would
Mm-hmm.
be wonderful. And the hose there, I believe there's a small hose right by the fence in front of the
Yes,
cemetery.
that you can
So we could
connect to.
bring that one hose and attach it.
Yeah, yeah.
Have plenty of room. Would the town also give us mulch?
Yes, we can
And
do
just
that.
a pile of it is fine.
Yeah.
We'll do it ourselves. And, oh, dig safe. So that has to be, do you think that area needs to be
It's probably
check.
best.
best? Okay.
These
Do you
old
guys
things.
want to do it or do you want us to do it?
Why don't you do it? I think.
Yes?
Because you're gonna have to mark where you're gonna plant them.
Yeah, I thought I'd go over with like a black spray,
It needs to be
Thing?
white.
white.
Dig safe.
Okay, I'll write that down. White
On the
spray paint?
ground, yeah. Yes, sir.
So you're actually going to be digging in a cemetery, is that correct?
No, it's more near the rails.
Inside the rail or outside the rail?
It's inside the
Inside
rail,
the rail.
but nowhere near the graves.
So I just want to advise you, some may remember when this town hall was renovated, bones were found as they excavated out front. And they were determined to be bones that were not identified, that should have been part of the regular cemetery. Be advised, when you start to dig, you may encounter things that maybe you didn't expect.
Well,
If there's
luckily-
any way
Well,
you
the
could look
town's
at.
going to be digging, so the
Well,
town will encounter them.
That's my point. When you say
Well-
dig safe, I'm saying check the
Well,
records
luckily,
on burials and
where
so
they're-
forth.
Where they're
Safe.
going.
Oh, I'm not
we-
kidding.
We already dug out the forsythias that were there, they were huge, so we would've hit the bones then if we hit those bones there, so I don't think we have to worry, but yes, we can tell highway department to be careful.
So you want us to do dig safe then,
Dig safe and mark where they're gonna be,
and mark?
and explain to dig safe where the marks are.
Yes, I'll meet them there or whatever,
Okay.
although I don't know if you can do that because you never know when they're going to show up, right?
Yeah, as long as you give them a description, near the monument,
Mm-hmm.
and nice big white circles,
Is that how you want me to do it, Mark? A circle, not an
Yeah.
X?
so they'll see it.
Okay. Anything else I should know then?
I think that's it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you
Thank you
very
for the
much.
donation.
Thank you for
Thank
your
very much for the
consideration.
donation.
I think we need a motion?
Yes.
So I move to accept the tree donation, the 2-tree donation from the Holliston Garden Club, and move also to direct the Holliston Highway Department to dig 2 holes, leaving the dirt, 2 holes for the size of each the size of a 10-gallon pot. That's a 7-foot tall tree.
Well, may I just clarify that a
Yeah.
little bit? That's what size the pot
Yep.
is, but the actual
Yep.
holes should be at least twice as big as that.
I assume they have expertise doing that.
So approximately 2 feet deep and 2 feet wide would be,
4 feet, I think, wide, don't you?
that might be excessive, yeah.
2 feet's not big enough for a 10
Well, no, this is 2 feet.
On each side,
Yeah, yeah.
4 feet.
Well, no, I think 2 feet in circumference is plenty for that size. It's only 7 to 8 foot trees.
How about of sufficient size to accommodate a 10-gallon
Right.
tree?
And add to that motion as well that the Holliston Highway Department will leave mulch,
Yep.
will turn on the water,
Mm-hmm.
and will leave a hose by April 10th.
Perfect.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you
Aye.
very
And
much.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right. And thank you for coming in and
Thanks for listening.
enlightening us.
Appreciate it.
Okay, we have the school committee next. We talk about statement of interest, which was requested by the school committee board, and very prominent, what should say, celebratory superintendent for recently getting a national award. Here in our very own little Holliston is pretty remarkable, so
We need a liquor license
congratulations to you.
application.
Thank you very much. Look, I
Okay.
hope you look favorably
Okay,
upon my
'cause
request.
we have nothing across the hall.
Think about it.
When?
So, good evening, and thank you for having us.
haven't
This
had-
is, so we are here as the second step in this process that
So,
Dr. Jackson
check
will
tomorrow.
review with you. So the school committee has
They'll have to
voted
come in and sign especially.
voted in favor of moving forward with applying to be part of a partnership with the
You're all done.
Massachusetts School Building Authority. And what that partnership is you work together to do a feasibility study to determine the scope and the details of a project, and our project being the Holliston High School. So it is almost 60 years old, and we would like to partner with the state to determine next steps for where we should go with it. So that's sort of the high level. So the school committee has already voted in favor of this, and now the second part of this application is for the select board to take a vote on it, at which then Dr. Jackson will send in the application in April. And then just like we went through the process this past year, we would hope to have an answer from the state in the December, January timeframe.
Next year, right?
Yes.
Can you share with the residents the cost and when the cost would come into play for the town with the feasibility study? If I recall, last time it was about $1 million or something like that.
So Brad will go through that as part of his presentation.
Okay.
So if it's
Sure.
okay, may I have him start going through?
Sure,
for you, and we will
absolutely.
answer, and, ask questions. I would say if you don't mind, ask questions while you go through.
I know many of you sat through this last time, and
Thank you.
I hesitate to give another presentation but I know Ms. Hine wasn't here last time,
I'm
and
very
but I
familiar
see
with
you-
last year's documents.
see
so
you
if
have
wanna-
the
It's good for the
document in front of you.
residents, too.
We are here tonight, I am here tonight after receiving a unanimous vote from the Holliston School Committee to request that the Holliston Select Board authorize me to submit a statement of interest to the Mass School Building Authority on behalf of Holliston High School to establish a partnership with the Mass School Building Authority in our efforts to determine how to best proceed with our school building. The tabs you have, the notebook you have in front of you, I'm not going to go through the whole presentation because it will probably turn off televisions across Holliston. But I wanted to select a couple of highlights. At this point in time, Holliston High School was first conceived back in 1965. It began construction that next year and opened in 1969. In 2001, and you saw a picture of beautiful Holliston High School as it opened in 1969. In 1998, Holliston High School was a little under 30 years old. Probably by the time when they were doing this when they were starting to think about this, Holliston High School was probably about 25 years old, which parenthetically is almost the age of Miller and Placentino right now. It's new complex. It's a little over 20 years old. So I know it seems like
It was just
this renovation project was just yesterday, but the distance of time between when Holliston High School was built and when it was renovated was we would be doing Placentino Miller in the next 5 or 10 years if we followed that same timeline. And I'm not here asking for that. But I just wanted to point out that at that time, we had a $26 million renovation. which updated HVAC, electrical and plumbing, put in a new fire and building alarm system, established network connectivity to all the classrooms, which was hardwire at the time. It built a dark room, and it actually added a new the central office wing, the office where my office is, that little semicircle is new. That was added as part of new construction. It replaced, I'm on page 7 of the presentation for those who, members of the select board. It did some cosmetic improvements. It replaced the floor and ceiling tiles and carpeting, replaced all the student lockers, which probably haven't been opened in 5 years now. It put in a new field house floor. It reupholstered the seats in the auditorium, but did not replace them. And it bought new classroom furniture, painted the whole building, and it spent about $1.1 million on computers out of the $26 million. The first item I wanted to pause on for a moment was to address a question that I know is out in the community about what have we done since the time when that renovation took place. Since that time, renovation took place within our budget. Each year, we invest, we meaning the Holliston taxpayers and the school committee on their behalf, invest over $300,000 in cleaning and preventative maintenance services by third parties. That does not include, I'm on page 8 now, that does not include the preventative maintenance services that are done by our 2 maintenance staff members, 2, 3?
At the high school,
One at the high school, and but primarily at the high school. And we also spent last year in FY19 over $62,000 in building repairs performed by third parties, in addition to those repairs performed by our own staff. Over the past 10 years, Holliston has invested over $1.1 million in Holliston High School in terms of capital improvement projects and upgrades. Those include teacher and student technology, almost $150,000 for replacement of athletic facilities, which were the stands and the new track that was, the resurfacing of the track that was done.
It came out good, too.
It did, didn't it? We've done actually 2 distinct network upgrades. We first went to a wireless network, and then just recently upgraded that wireless actually over last February vacation to a faster wireless network. We spent over $75,000 to replace the auditorium sound system, $114,000 to improve the energy efficiency of Holliston High School, which includes all these lights that actually had, as it turns out, less than a 2-year payback on that investment. We spent almost $40,000 in security upgrades, $40,000 on roof repairs, and over $20,000 to replace broken cleaning equipment. In addition, with our, so that's the capital expenditures that have taken place and have been approved separately by town meeting. Within our local appropriation over the past 10 years, in addition to the $300,000 we spend annually in cleaning and preventative maintenance, almost $400,000 when you add in the building repairs, we spent an additional $350,000 over the past 10 years to replace a broken fire alarm system, to make a major contribution to the construction of a concession stand at Comedian Field. The school committee basically 50-50 split the cost of the main basketball court replacement in the field house. We funded furniture replacement and upgrades at a significant level. We replaced an air conditioning unit in our head end room. We've replaced all the gas fittings in our science labs. We've repurposed 1 classroom into a group meeting space. We built Studio 370. It used to be years ago, it used to be the yearbook office, and it's been built, repurposed into that beautiful art studio that where we are able to display student work. We've repurposed the engine and metal shop into a new workable science lab. We've repurposed the home economics room into our new special education transition program. We repurposed what was originally called the Head Start room, which back in, even in 2000, there was a classroom set aside for a preschool Head Start program. And that program actually was discontinued before I arrived here in 2004. That is also a special education, specialized learning space for our Connections program. And we repurposed the dark room. Now with the advent of digital photography, the dark room was no longer needed, and that was repurposed into small group instruction. So we have worked hard to maintain the investment that the taxpayers have made in Holliston High School. Nonetheless, we see, and then over the next 10 years, if you turn to page, what I've dubbed page 8A, because I inserted page 8, I added this page just today. A quick review of some infrastructure needs over the next 10 years shows that we are conservatively estimating in FY18 dollars that we're going to need over the next 10 years about $11 million of capital improvements. At the top of the list, as Mr. Aronian remembers from our conversations at the last year, is the fact that the septic system at Holliston High School is original to the building. And while there were some replacements to the pump chambers back in 2002, the leaching field and all of the basic infrastructure of that septic system is original to 1969. And we're on a from the DEP. It is I'm trying to think of the word. We have a limit on the amount of water we can actually pull. We can actually use on a monthly basis because of the size of that. Now, frankly, it's not a limit that we're that worried about, because the limit was designed when students showered after PE classes, and those things. Just that world has changed.
That's awful.
And also those were FY18 estimates. If you look on page 9, if you take those estimates, according to Construction Analytics, which is economics behind the headlines, the inflation rate for construction averaged 4.5% per year over the last 4 years. So if you assume an inflation rate of 4.5%, that $11 million estimate is now $13 million. If we take a much more conservative estimate and say it's about the rate of inflation, which would be about 2.5% a year, we're still looking at about $12 million. And so with that in mind, we brought this information to the consultant that was procured at the request of the Select Board and the Finance Committee to put together the capital improvement plan back 3 or 4 years ago. And they basically said, wow, that's a lot of projects. You guys should think about getting the state, partnering with the state on a statement of interest. So they took all of the high school projects, removed them from the capital improvement plan, and said, go forth to the state. So either we need to put those projects back into the capital improvement plan and begin financial planning around those issues, or we have to continue on the path that we have been on. At the same time, however, as Holliston makes that decision, it's important to consider some of the challenges that we find inherent with this building that was built in 1969. The footprint itself has not changed and was designed for instruction for the instructional model that existed in 1969. We have all of our classroom spaces completely inflexible. All of the classrooms are 4 cinder block walls. There's no expanding classes, combining classes, combining classrooms. That's a very typical approach to school design today. The classroom structures are much more flexible. We have moving walls between classrooms so that you can expand or contract them based on need, which hinders a lot of our issues around special education, arts and music. We've been looking to expand our computer science offerings at the high school. We have a huge demand for that. And I want to continue to encourage that. We're offering more engineering and robotics courses. You may know that the Robo Panthers, our after-school robotics team, came in first at a tournament last weekend that took place in Connecticut. A huge accomplishment for Holliston High School. It's called US First competition. It's very, very exciting. The building design itself was built essentially to take advantage of the size of the property. It is grossly energy efficient. We have you've heard me tell this 1,000 times before, the boilers are down by the field house, and they have to pump hot water, because we're a forced hot water heating system. They have to pump hot water all the way up from that area all the way up to the science labs near my office. You can imagine the heat dissipation that takes place in that area. It is a long way. It's a huge bottleneck at four corners, and the large footprint is a tremendous waste of land. We all acknowledge the need for field space in this community, but they built the property to take advantage of the size of the property, and school construction typically they build up instead of out, so it is a very inefficient use of the land. Moreover, one of the issues that was never a consideration in 1969 is building security. That building has over 40 exterior doors. Wow. And I don't want to harp on that, but that in a much more compact design where you build up and not out, you have a much easier building to manage in terms of building security. Not only that, but you also, in today's world, you design building entrances much different than you did in 1969. We do have insufficient PE and athletic spaces. We just went through a brouhaha around our middle school track program that's seeking to get additional access to our practice fields up here at the high school. We have the indoor games and practice space we don't have enough of them. I encourage you, come up to the high school at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then walk into that field house. Take care, because you will probably get hit with a stray basketball. There are practices going on. There's a pickup basketball game in one of the courts. The weight room is being used by a number of students, supervised, of course, and there are a couple of teams practicing it as well. It is a very, very heavily used facility. We have no tennis courts. We have both boys and girls varsity and junior varsity tennis program that cannot practice or play their games on our property.
Where do they go?
They either come down here, or sometimes they go to Northeastern.
Goodwill Park.
Yes.
Yeah.
But one of the problems with that is typically you want to have enough courts so that all of the matches can take place simultaneously.
Right.
So that we're trying to get these students back so they can do their homework and do those types of things. So when you have to, I'm grateful for the courts,
Right.
but they're not enough to run a whole tennis match through, whole team through it simultaneously. Our science labs are very worrisome. They are interior. The number of interior classrooms, as you recall, we had a site visit by the MSBA last year as part of our application, or in response to our application. I think Mr. Cronin, you were there at the site visit. It would be my assessment that the thing they found most remarkable about Holliston High School is the significant number of interior classroom spaces that we have. It's unheard of in today's building environment, particularly in high schools. I think everyone's aware of traffic flow. We have no group meeting space. Basically, we are at a point where we need to, where we need to either invest in the current facility we have at a significant level, tens of millions of dollars in our estimate, or at least a minimum of $10 million over the next 10 years. Or we, and we will still have a building that has some of the design deficiencies and some of the challenges that we face from an instructional perspective. Or we can review our options. And basically, that is what I am here to advocate tonight. I am here to seek professional help through the MSBA to find out what is the best way for Holliston to address the physical plant needs and the educational deficiencies that currently exist at Holliston High School. And the way we do that is through expertise outside of Holliston that has been doing this for years. We need some data, and that typically takes the form of a feasibility study. And in my opinion, and we can go out, the school committee could make a request to town meeting and fund it all ourselves, but the Mass School Building Authority is a partner who offers both expertise and financial assistance to communities to conduct this work and the work that would follow from this work. A feasibility study investigates all the potential options and solutions. It includes cost estimates and addresses schools' deficiencies and issues. It includes an engineering study of the building and site systems that are performed by a qualified architect, experienced in school systems building design, and qualified building engineers, landscape architects, including people who do septic system and those types of design. And the final report is multiple options for the community to consider with an analysis of each option. So you can do nothing, you can continue to repair piecemeal, you can do a wholesale renovation on your school, or you can tear it down and start over. The whole gamut of options. Contrary
And
to...
then, excuse me, comes as part of the feasibility study.
Yes.
That they will point you out.
They, as part of the feasibility study, they will partner with you to come up with a joint recommendation for proceeding. They will, if they think it should be a renovation and the town wants to do a new build, you can do that, but they're only gonna support you to the, as far as the point of they would if you did a renovation. So ultimately, the solution is up to the town, but I'm saying that, so technically that's true, practically you partner towards a solution.
I see.
Can I interject a
Go ahead.
question? I just really want to latch on to something you just said, that the core program offers solutions that may not include a new build. The town could decide otherwise, but they will only use the word support. Is it a fair assumption, a correct assumption, to say that the core program could lead to MSBA funding for renovations? When you say support,
Oh,
do you mean
absolutely.
funding?
Yes, absolutely. So the MSBA, if they will, they do not just do new builds.
Okay,
The
so this core
MSBA
program could,
The core program will support, at the same percent, will support
okay.
whatever solution we jointly come to at the same percentage rate.
And then is it also fair to say, is it an accurate statement to say that the accelerated repair program does not pay for, as I'm reading it as you're speaking, the accelerated repair program does not pay for renovation of the learning space?
The accelerated
It's only
repair program
boilers.
is boilers,
Okay.
windows, and doors.
Okay. All right.
And roofs, thank
And
you.
roofs.
And roofs.
While we're on that point, I was going to hold this question, but it's relevant. Maybe it's a question for you, Keith, but Doctor, if you don't mind, the program you're presenting to us showed in 1998 through 2001, the $26 million renovation that was done included HVAC replacement. Was that the boiler?
The boiler as well as rooftop units. We have a
a warm air system
That's what I
in a
thought.
number of spaces, forget.
So the accelerator repair program directs districts not to file an SOI if the boiler is less than 20 years old.
Correct.
And it would,
Accelerator repair.
so I don't think we'd qualify.
Well, we would not, and we're not, and the boiler right now is not at a point where we would, if we were not doing anything, the boiler system itself is not at a point where we would recommend today to replace it. We're saying,
It
like
works
the
hard.
like the MSBA is saying, once they get to be 25 and 30 years old, that's the time, which is why they have that piece in there.
So
The
it's
other-
within the 10 years, but not immediately.
It's not, right, which is why that's in there, that's 0 to 10. The other thing about the accelerated repair program, because I know you're getting a lot of feedback, and I'm very grateful that you are, and that based on, so this is, if you look at the tab for the accelerated repair in the information I gave you today, you may have some, you may be looking at your old information, but the thing that I find, based on qualifications for the ARP, a district should not file an SOI for consideration in the accelerated repair program if the district plans a future construction project for MSBA participation going beyond roofs, windows/doors, and boilers for the school. In other words, if you go for the ARP, you have put
You've
yourself
declared.
back.
You've declared, yeah.
You've declared.
Yeah.
And all the other projects you have to do, like a septic system, you have to pay for yourself.
You have to pay for yourself.
So it's a very tricky thing.
Versus core, which gives you the benefit through the feasibility of both potential outcomes, renovate or build new.
That's correct. And so I think, and I appreciate the question, because I think I think that people are using some shortcut words to talk about this, saying we need a new high school. I am not sitting here tonight saying we need a new high school. I am sitting here tonight saying we need to decide the future of Holliston High School, and we need help deciding what that future should be. I do not have the answer. I do not recommend that we tear down Wilmington High School and rebuild it. I leave that recommendation to the experts. But my request
You
is
did
that
say Wilmington High School. you
I
meant
did say
Holliston.
Wilmington High School. Because
You're
I,
not home.
because
You're not
I'm,
home yet.
because I'm paying, you should see my taxes for Wilmington High School. I do not recommend,
Well, that's what,
I'm gonna explain that Freudian slip, because I actually stood up on town meeting. I actually stood up on town meeting floor in Wilmington and argued against the new Wilmington High School. But that being said,
I'll get that tape, don't worry.
yeah. It was a doozy. Once you have once you've gone there through the ARP, you really have set your course for at least the next 10 years. And I think I understand that there are important and challenging items that the leadership of this community is trying to balance. And having said that, my job is to advocate for Wilmington High School, for Holliston High School. Why am I doing it? Now you guys got me going here. I do
Oh,
want
it's
to.
late too.
I do want to report out on one thing before I conclude and ask for any other questions. I did want to turn, if I could just ask you to turn to page 26. Just the statement of interest that I'll be submitting is a statement of the problem only, not a solution. There is no cost or obligation to submit it. It requires the school committee, and I should have changed this, I apologize, it's an old slide, and the select board to vote to authorize me to submit it. And the date of my deadline is April 8th. last year, the select board and the school committee both unanimously approved the submission. And we made the first cut, which, and because this was our first submission ever. And I was frank, and when I came here last year, I said, it's gonna take 5 to 7 years, and I still believe that. But when we made the first cut, I got a little nervous, because I had set expectations, it was gonna take 5 to 7 years before we got picked. Well, we didn't get picked. One of the reasons I think we didn't get picked is that I included on page 27 the districts that, there were only 12 districts, 12 projects that were invited into the eligibility period. That actually is a very small number. They're usually 16, 17, 18 projects that are invited in. The reason is the first two on that list. There were 2 regional vocational technical high schools that were included on the list. Those things are mucho dinero.
Yeah.
They make a comprehensive high school look inexpensive in comparison. But on top of that, there were 3 comprehensive high schools, both of which, 3 of which are about the size, actually mostly about the size of Holliston. Neshoba's, they're all actually about the size of Holliston High School, and 1 middle school. So there are, there was some competition that had a higher need than we did, which is not a bad thing to learn. We don't know where there were 12 invited. There were about 30 that met the first cut. So we know of the 61, we were in the top half in terms of need. And we know we weren't in the top 1/6. So we were somewhere between 13 and 30. And that's all they'll tell us. They encourage, they encourage communities to reapply, and the need has not changed. I know the challenges that we as a community face continue to mount and grow. I respect that, but I'm here tonight asking that we seek this request. One thing I did want to note, the SBA, the MSBA, it used to be called the SBA, the MSBA reimbursement that we were told last year we would receive was 48.05%. Now, they haven't published the number for this year, so I don't know what it is. It's above 30 and below 80. I don't have much reason to believe it would change significantly, but that's a big chunk of change. So if, even just for the feasibility study, I think it will, I estimate, to answer your first question, the feasibility study, off the top of my head, about maybe $750,000. If they pay for almost half of that, that's $375,000 to help us get that answer. And again, for the core program review, there are a number of off-ramps that we as a community can take. We can, first of all, we can be invited into the feasibility study and not appropriate the money for the feasibility study and say, thank you for inviting us in, but we changed our mind. I think that would probably make a few people at the State House a little upset at us, but we can do it. And we can do it by the fact that the voters ultimately have to appropriate the Holliston's share of the cost of the feasibility study. After the feasibility study, we'll have all the options. There'll be a lot of community meetings and discussions with all of the elected and officials, with the public. And at that point in time, there'll be another decision by the community. Do we want to fund this project? So this is not we are not getting on a highway without exit ramps. We are getting on a highway that will march us towards a solution and then allow us to make a decision as to whether or not we can afford that solution once we get to that point.
If we follow Brad's logic, we'll be on the highway to Wilmington in a couple of
Apparently.
minutes. but-
Maybe I'm just trying to get home tonight, I don't know.
That's so funny. Well, thank you.
I haven't done that
I-
in years.
Do you have some questions, Tina?
Yeah, so are we gonna do discussion and then talk about a motion? How do you guys wanna handle?
Well, I think, if we'll have you ask questions, and John, and then I, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think, so one thing that I'm struggling with, just from the a logical approach to making a decision tonight, is the role that page 8A plays in all of this. If I heard you correctly, I got the impression at least that 8A, all of these infrastructure needs over the next 10 years, would not be a path taken if we're taking the path of the core program. If I heard you correctly, I may not have heard you correctly. So my question is, from a planning point of view for capital, 8A here, these items here on the short-term infrastructure needs, they stay in the capital improvement plan for the town regardless of any path we take.
These items will remain in the plan, but there is, when you're working towards towards an SOI, the community ultimately has to make some decisions about investment. So, for example, last year, when we submitted the statement of interest, the school committee decided to defer the capital request to replace the committee and field turf, with the understanding that that's a partial piece of one of these infrastructure projects, with the understanding that we wanted to keep the site as flexible as possible if some miracle happened and we were invited into the feasibility study this year. If you'll pardon the expression, it's not feasible to wait the committee and field project can't wait any longer. So that project was recommended by me to the school committee, and the school committee has voted to bring that project forward as a capital project this year. So it will, it's hard to characterize this other than to say it will inform how we approach this list, but not necessarily stop it, because the building, I have an obligation, we all have an obligation to maintain this building over the next several years.
Perhaps that's one of the points I'm making, because there are items here on the infrastructure list that could ultimately impact the condition of the building when the feasibility study takes place. So I could be ill-informed here, but I would say that probably the field house bleachers would not impact that feasibility study in terms of making a recommendation, MSBA making a recommendation for a new build. However, the septic might much more likely impact a decision at the time of the feasibility study for a new build. So that's the part that I just procedurally, I'm a little it's not clear to me how we travel these two paths together. Look at these, while also going down the path of the core program.
That's a great question, and my recommendation to the committee would not be to use that framework as a decision-making framework, but to, if we start to get significant warning signs that the septic system is about to fail, we have to take action regardless of whether it would hurt our statement of interest chances or not. And if we do that, then the decision the school committee and the select board make the next year about whether or not to submit a statement of interest could change based on that variable. So this is always going to be a moving target here, and that's the challenge we have. My job, I have to keep the building open. I have to keep it well maintained. The last thing the MSBA expects us to maintain our building and will not invest in a reconstruction, renovation, new build in a community that fails to maintain its buildings.
Sure, right.
So we would look at this through that lens, but ultimately, if I can't have athletes on an unsafe field. I can't open a school without a working septic system. You know, things like the window units, you know, we've been living with those for 50 years. Are they awful? Do I wish we didn't have them? Absolutely. Every time I walk, you know, every time we sit in the library and freeze at a school committee meeting, except for the last week. You know, I don't, you know, that bothers me. But
So some of the things I think, so the school committee, when we are looking at the budget, we really are using our strategic plan to figure out how to create a fair, a fair and responsible budget, right? Because every year I would vote for Brad's recommendation and then another 10% on top of that if I could. But realistically, we're trying to be responsible. So we go back to our strategic plan, and it's about, when we can, to focus your funds on the core classroom needs. And so we've had this conversation before. There are some situations where we've made decisions not to fund something because in our eyes it's more of a cosmetic issue. And, with the pie being the size that it is, we're trying to focus on the classroom needs. So that we take very seriously,
so I think it's safe.
Say something? Sorry. I just
Go ahead.
I know I'm not sitting at the table there. It's Anne Louise Manstead. I'm vice chair of the committee and budget subcommittee chair. Tina, I think it would be a mistake for you or for us to look at that list as something that we would sort of strategically time vis-a-vis the statement of interest. Precisely because we're not trying to game the system, if you will. We maintain probably the most comprehensive list of capital asset tracking and possible projects in the town, and in part because we have the biggest set of facilities, if you will. But we've done, I would think, a fairly exhaustive review of every facility that is under the school district's responsibility. And that was built, as Brad said, 4 years ago. So it's in the capital improvement plan. It's in the tab that we talked about earlier today. And what's fluid about it is simply when these projects need to be done, either because we think there's a 10-year life and we get to year 9 and it looks like, we can eke out 3 more years, or something we thought was going to last 10 years, something happens and it may end sooner. So that list you have in front of you, we maintain that pretty carefully to inform what we're going to submit each fall or each spring, depending on the nature of the beast, to the town for a request, if you will. And as Stacy said, we balance that against other needs in the district.
Can I interrupt you for a quick second? I need to clarify something you're saying. I thought the doctor said the items for the high school were removed from the CIP.
I want to clarify that, because that's,
Didn't you say that, Brad?
I
You
did.
say it.
Thank you. Go.
They were removed several years ago for literally a few months.
Okay.
When, because at that point in time, what was happening is it was making the town look, I want to really correct my memory here, when you looked at all the projects and the prioritization, it was coming up, and I think they might have had a discount rate in there, et cetera, and a certain amount of funds set aside, and it didn't look feasible. And that's when the consultant said, look, we've got this big bucket of projects for the high school based on the exceptional scope of what was pending in the next 10 years. She said, what if we pull these things aside and consider approaching the MSBA and entering into that process? So temporarily, let's take them out of the CIP for the town so it doesn't overburden the CIP. That's literally what this was, and pursue this other process. But when it became evident that the process was either going to be delayed because we didn't get it on the agenda the first year, or there was some risk with that, Dr. Jackson and the school committee asked that those projects be put back into the CIP, and I didn't want to correct you while you were speaking, but they were put back in.
Oh, that's news to
So
me. I'm glad to
they
hear
are
that.
back in. They're on.
I haven't seen the CIP in a couple of years.
Yeah,
We-
it's
We've been
not even
asking for a
called that.
copy of the document.
We've got it.
Oh.
Yes, we have
Did you
it.
share that with me?
It was shared with
Oh,
Keith.
okay, great.
Keith now has electronic access to it. It was provided to him by Mary Bousquet and the Finance Committee, or maybe it was Sharon who has it. So he has it, and
Great.
all the school's projects are in there. So just for clarification, everything is in there, and it's accessible to all of you. And this is a subset of those things that are, you know, sort of some of the bigger ones and some of the ones that are coming up.
And the
on
list
next
that's there is not necessarily your priority list, 1 through.
These are the more significant projects. What's in this CIP, for lack of a better acronym, is literally everything from, you know,
It's a planning
replace
document, that's all it is.
replace light bulbs to chairs to, you know, a roof.
So
Okay,
there's,
a
so
very
it's not,
broad
there's not a
scope.
priority list, it's more like, this is all that we.
Well, it was, there was some degree of prioritization to the extent that we had expected life of an asset in there. We had some comments on sort of the conditions of an asset, if you will, so, you know, status of the asset, if you want to think of it that way. And then at the time that plan was done, there were a number of criteria assigned to these columns that said, you know, is this important to the town? Is it a safety issue? Is it a health issue,
Right.
et cetera? My understanding is those criteria have been wiped away. I don't think they should have been. I think it would be a great thing if all the boards could get together and come up with criteria to help prioritize some of these big projects. But that aside, there's still a way to get a sense of relative importance and urgency based on the expected life and sort of the status of an asset.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
No.
John?
I do have a few. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for the presentation. Is there a benefit for applying to this program year after year? And if so, what is that benefit?
If you ask, if you review the MSBA documents, they will be crystal clear and say that each year they review applications against the current applicants pool. So in that regard, if you apply year after year in a row, there are officially there's no benefit to that. There are, however, when they are culling their list, so to speak, they want to ensure that they are partnering with a community that is ready to partner with them. And so the algorithm they use to determine that level of commitment, there's the official written algorithm that answers that question officially no, and whether or not there's an unofficial algorithm that sees commitment to a project in terms of repeated applications, I can't say.
But also didn't, forgive me, the commissioners sat here and said to us that verbally, he said, that continued submission, he said openly, demonstrates to us the community is committed and that this is an important project.
I think basically the other piece about this, as you and I have talked about, John, is that, Mr. Cronin, excuse me, is that the chances of us being selected if we don't apply are 0 that year.
Right.
That is the only mathematical certainty I can offer.
Got it. As I understand it, you mentioned last year we were looking at 5 to 7 years before we could logically expect entry into the program. Once a school is welcomed into the program, from that point, from that year on, until the student enters the new facility, what's that actualization period time? So
That-
from feasibility, right, to occupancy, are we talking
I think
3
we're
years,
talking
3 years,
three,
5
3 to
years?
4, 3 to 4 years, I think. It would depend on the type of project you do. If you do an occupied addition renovation, might take longer than if you did a new build that you could kind of run independent, on a different site, which I don't think would be part of the consideration here. So it would clearly depend on the complexity of the project.
Mhm.
So I would say anywhere between 2 and 4 years.
How old is the roof on the high school?
As old as the building, so it's, since the renovation, so they installed it in 2000.
Oh, I didn't see that as part of the scope that was done back then. So the roof is 20 years old.
It's a new, yes, the new decking and new membrane, yes.
Okay, and we heard about the septic condition, getting by, but you have some restrictions placed on you by DEP.
It was the waiver,
Very high water table, too.
chicken books down higher, yeah.
That, how many students currently are educated at Hollis High School on a daily basis? What's your census today?
850?
And 15.
Yeah, 800.
How many was it designed for?
Well, that's an interesting question. I actually don't know the answer to that question, and frankly, respectfully, I'm not sure back in 2000 or even 1969, the numbers compare to how a building is used today.
The reason I'm asking is because, and this is maybe rhetorical, Doctor, but effectively, a student requires so many square feet, I would think, to be educated today. I'm sure the feasibility study will look at that.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if 200 to 250,000 square, what's the building now, 220?
Including the field house, 220 and change.
So 220, I don't know if Holliston's 800 students today require that kind of size facility. That's why I was asking. If things have changed
They have.
over the last 50
Absolutely.
years and the square footage needs for a child to be educated, or a young person to be educated. Just a thought.
I think the numbers,
The feasibility will look at something
the
like that.
feasibility would look at that for sure, and that's one of the reason I'm being a little hesitant here is that the nature of special education has changed significantly over the past 50 years, and the expectations for space and programs in district and the opportunities to educate all children in their community has changed significantly, so that does alter the capacity of a school. So, for example, one of our spaces, which was a Head Start room at one point in time, now is a special education classroom, 900 square feet, and it's got probably 7 students in it, 3 paraprofessionals, and 2 teachers. Because of the nature of the program. Those spaces were not even a blink of an eye thought back in 1969 and barely on the horizon in the year 2000.
Right. My next question doesn't have a lot to do with this SOI, but it has something to do with something Ms. Raffi brought up, which is your strategic vision. Is your committee, you've got a 5-year strategic vision, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Looking ahead, is it safe to say the school committee's looking at entering the ARM program for the Miller and Placentino School in the next 5 years?
Maybe, we haven't even talked about that yet, so we have 1 more year of our strategic plan, which means we're gonna start
So
looking
those
at that
schools will
again.
be principally
Yeah.
outside that 20-year window. They would be eligible for certain types of improvements that I think are in the CIP right now. I believe you've got a roof for,
I have roofs for
Miller.
every school, I've got boilers for every school listed in the CIP.
right, and ARM seems like a better solution for those schools
Oh
because
my goodness,
I'm not
yes.
an educator, but
yeah.
I wouldn't compare Holliston High School's educational environment, the core,
Yep.
pun intended, to that of those other schools. And I think if
Absolutely.
if citizens care about the care of their buildings, I would encourage your committee to kind of strongly recommend, looking ahead, notwithstanding whatever happens to the high school, that you're at least showing we want to maintain with great state matching dollars these other schools down the road.
Yep.
And I acknowledge it's outside
Yep,
what
no,
you're
no.
talking about
No,
tonight.
it's,
but-
that's
it's, it's a very good point. It's, and I think we can all agree that when I look at our Woodland campus, those buildings were completely redesigned for instruction in the year 2000, or built new in 2000 for the instructional needs of the students there, and are much more flexible than Halston High School, which, you know, we know the history. It was the last renovation. They took basically the rest of the money in the bond and took it as far as they could.
My last point is, you know, a year ago, I voted for the statement of interest along the lines of it doesn't hurt to ask. You can't get anything if you're not in the game. Little did I know or envision that in the fall town meeting, we would encounter some remarks made by the chair of the finance committee that other priorities, capital projects for the town that this board has supported would be held hostage until the statement of interest associated with the high school was made known. That kind of took me by surprise. Obviously, the statement of interest was not supported. We've been talking with the finance committee chairman since then, and I want to say that Dr. Jackson and I, Mr. Shader, we had an occasion, I think a little over about a week ago actually, we were on TV. Mr. Jackson looked spectacular in his Floridian tan. Sorry, San Diego tan, Wilmington tan, whatever you want to call it. But we had a chance to kind of touch that issue. Mr. Shada gave some clarity, and I had a follow-up conversation with him since then. And what I think, and I don't want to speak for Ken, but what I think he's explained to me, Mr. Chairman and Ms. Hine, is that he believes that the studies associated with the capital projects that we design for Public Works needed more breathing time, more detail, and he had no intention, if you will, to have these projects collide or compete with one another. They should stand on their own. So I'm in support of Dr. Jackson's SOI this evening under the bearing that when we present our DPW articles, they get a fair shake and the opportunity to be funded, because my personal view is, as we move forward with developing a debt model for our town that can support the strategies, the vision, borrow Ms. Raffy's word, we can try to fit these projects in under a 10-year loan period, our projects, while this high school takes form and shape over the next 5 to 10 years or so. And I think that's my takeaway, Brad, is, you know, for parents, citizens, the takeaway has to be, what's my expectation? If I'm looking at Holliston to move here, and we heard this from your colleagues, Ann Louise, am I looking at the school system? Huh?
I echo it. If they're moving here, I know.
Yeah, I mean, what is the plan? What's the educational plan? Well, my kids see a new high school. What's that benefit to me? And I'd like to say that Holliston supports our education, but I'd like to set the expectation there'll be no high school tomorrow. It's going to be years in the making, and as long as we acknowledge that as we move ahead with that capital understanding, my personal perception is I'll see that building in about 10 years. That's my thinking, and I think I said as much last year. I think it's reasonable to expect that we're going to be in SOI, you know, world for some amount of years, and then actualization beyond that before we incur costs and a bond to go with it. So that's my perception, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Hine. Thank you.
Very good. So I very much want to, I'm glad that you had that conversation with the finance chair, because my concern was too that we need to spend some money in addition to upgrading the school or whatever renovation, whatever the study would show. And it's really important that we do not be afraid of tackling these other issues. Just because we might have something big on the horizon doesn't mean that we're not responsible for the resident who is here today talking about her water. And the pictures, I don't know if you were here to see the pictures, but it was pretty remarkable. And so I want to make sure that we have enough community support to do these other things that are very important to the town as well. Because I've always argued if your water infrastructure's not up to par, nobody's gonna wanna live here. Forget about retail values of your home. We have to get these basic things right. So I'm very much pleased that the finance chair understands that these things need to stand on their own and be considered, whether we have something big on the horizon or not.
That was my understanding.
Okay, that's really important to me because I don't want to be at a standstill with this community every time we want to do a study to get something important accomplished. I'd like to get the support of the community and not be afraid, just because, we shouldn't be afraid because we have something on the horizon that's a big investment. We have to remember that we need to support our whole town, and it needs to be a healthy town, and it needs to be inclusive of everything that goes on in this town. So I am ready to listen to anyone in the audience that wants to make any comments about the SOI, if there's anyone. If not, then we'll go to a vote.
Can I just ask, Ben, can I put you on the spot and suggest that your understanding of the study and the interpretation of the studies for public works need to stand on their own and be given the opportunity to fund and expend without the impact of the statement of interest hanging over it?
Absolutely, I support that. I think it's important to, I think one of the things that I'd like to see is the residents of the town be able to make their own minds how these things could be prioritized and put into perspective. I think one of the things that is, this process, certainly, there's elected officials, but I'd like to see town meeting be able to have some weigh in because, there's a lot of money here and a lot of expenses here, and we want to make sure that we're not trying to do too many things at once.
Right.
So, it's sort of that balance. Like, we don't want to hold anything hostage. I don't like that term. I don't think that's,
It was the takeaway based on the public remarks, Ben.
No,
It wasn't a quote.
I understand where you're coming from. I guess, like, for me, I like to sort of think about it a little bit more.
Clear.
Different kind of terms, that's all I'm saying. And I think it's just that we need to kind of decide as a town what our priorities are,
Water
maybe
infrastructure.
It could be library, it could be DPW, it could be, there's a whole bunch of things that we need to think about. And I just think we're talking about a lot of things and we need to start putting order to those things.
And I do want to repeat what Ken Sager has said many times, and he's very correct. And that is the pot is only so big, right? You don't want to make it so that it's too expensive to live in this town to begin with. So, that's the sort of, tough love that we need to hear as a community.
We also need to invest in our infrastructure.
we need to.
And we need to make sure that we don't, as has been said on numerous occasions, kick the can down the road
Right.
and
Does us
leave the
no
next
good.
generation in the same circumstance
Yeah.
that we find ourselves.
It's not fair to the next generation.
Hashtag need a vision.
And you had another comment?
Well, just maybe I need the last word. I don't know. I don't think this is a need versus want vote tonight at all. I think that there are multiple points along the way where residents will be able to weigh in feasibility study approval, debt approval, and so on. So I don't see this as a need versus want at all. And I do accept the finance chair's comments that infrastructure spending needs to be based on studies that guide the planning process. So I'm like all of us glad to hear that that's going to be a view supported going forward. So I move to accept the statement of interest offered, unanimously voted on by the school committee, and I will read it as follows.
Please.
If we
It
have,
needs to be read into the record, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So the motion to accept the statement of interest is as follows. Resolved, having convened an open meeting on March 9th, 2020, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the Select Board of the Town of Holliston, in accordance with its charters, bylaws, and ordinances, have voted to authorize the Superintendent of Schools to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated April 8th, 2020, for Holliston High School located at 370 Hollis Street, Holliston, Massachusetts,
Or Wilmington. Sorry.
01746, which
No,
describes
don't
and
wanna-
explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority area number 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of a school facility, systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilating systems to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. And priority area number 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. And hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Holliston to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very
for the
much.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
Yes.
Mark?
I'll see you Wednesday.
Thanks.
Oh, good. Yes, for that.
Yes.
I don't, yeah.
No kisses, Stacy. We do elbows
on the
here.
agenda.
Oh,
So
here's
we'll
the-
approve it, and then they'll sign it.
That's why we're gonna meet
Tomorrow,
on Wednesday, right? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Brad, I'm
Bonnie?
just gonna share one thing with you real quick.
Oh, Donna?
From,
She works over here.
have you seen this?
She has it.
This is from Catherine.
Okay. When did you talk to her?
This statement here. Do you want me to, I'll forward this to you.
Yes.
Alright, sorry. Okay.
Okay,
We'll
moving
track it
on
down.
to some board business. We have the town administrator wants to talk to us about a consulting firm. But I have since talked to the principal of the firm for Paradigm, and he's agreed to come meet us next week at 6:30 in an open session.
Monday?
I had asked him to come himself as the principal of the company, that I think the board would feel better speaking to him directly. And this would entail helping us professionally with the screening process of hiring a new town administrator to replace Jeff with his retirement. So I think we can just table this until next week, and we can talk to him directly. And, because we had some questions, and I think it's good to talk to the owner.
I just have a couple of thoughts, Mr. Chairman. if I
Sure.
could. I did ask a question last week, and I might have a brain cramp, but I don't remember an affirmative response that they can provide us a salary range of competitive positions in the area. Did we get an answer from him?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly, he
Okay.
said that they could provide that.
Great. That's something we're gonna need right quick.
He said he was gonna email me that, when I talked to him yesterday.
Great. The reason we need that is because, as Mr. Ritter knows,
For our
the
budget.
select board's budget needs to be submitted
Right.
and heard, and to some extent, any potential increase to that range has to be considered
Right.
for FY
We need
'21.
to have, we need to have a little flexibility when we're hiring someone.
Right, but we need to base it on some facts. So I'd like,
Absolutely.
above all else, above all the things that they're offering us, that has to be like thing one.
Oh, he's gonna do that before he comes next Monday.
Great,
I asked him if he could do that, he said he would.
thank you.
All right.
And I also, I respect Mr. Petron a lot. I know he's a well-seasoned public professional, but I'd respectfully request that because of potential conflicts, we ask for another principal from Paradigm be assigned to this.
Yes, and I talked to him about that too, where Mr. Petron was the boss of 2 employees in town hall, there's a little bit of a
Conflict, yeah.
conflict, so he
Great.
said that wouldn't be a problem either.
Great.
Okay,
Sounds good to me.
annual town meeting warrant.
if I could just
to
add
look
something
at
here,
the
I think-
latest revision.
If I could just add something to, under that item, under the
Yes.
agenda. I would advise the board that you should start thinking about the concept of a screening committee,
Mm-hmm.
okay? I mean, I know the last time this was done, I think each member of the board came up with 1 or 2 people. So, just some,
They had
just
some
some advice.
options as far as how the screening would be done, so I'd like to hear him Monday night next week
Okay.
first.
Yep.
before we proceed with that.
So I'm understanding you correctly, Jeff, you would like the board to select the screening committee?
Well, it's the board's decision, not mine.
Okay, I thought we
you know,
gave them a direct.
I mean, there's a couple of different approaches. I mean, you could just turn all the resumes over to the consultant and have them screen it, or you could have more of a citizen-based kind of
Yeah.
screening group.
I chaired that group, and he's right. There was a period of time where citizens were given the opportunity to express interest in a screening committee, and the select board went through each of the applicants and, interested parties and picked a couple. So I think it was 7, wasn't it, Jeff? I think it was.
I don't know.
You remember all those glowing faces on the side of the table?
But let's talk to him next Monday and then go from there.
Sure enough.
You want the screening committee then sort of
Yes.
chosen names after next Monday?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So annual town meeting warrants, latest revisions, there's 54 articles.
So, well, I didn't actually count them, but, and this is, again, still a work in progress. I have completed the, all the articles that I'm aware of, anyway, into the document. And there's some, obviously, further editing that has to get done. But from last week, I inserted, toward the back of the draft document that you have in front of you, I inserted the potential acquisition of the piece of property on Washington Street. I inserted language for the Middlesex County Retirement System Stabilization Fund. Again, this is going to have to be massaged through town council and perhaps our auditor. I inserted language under KK, Host Community Agreement Stabilization Fund. And I was proposing that we transfer $100,000 from free cash into that fund. And that would be used to offset some of our ongoing expenses. Article LL is the retroactive road acceptances. Really comes from the planning board. There are several roads that were accepted formally in town over the years, but never got registered with the at the Registry of Deeds. So Karen Sherman's recommending that we do that over again. Article MM, I inserted Washington Street at Woodland and High Street, a traffic signal LED upgrade. And that was at $5,700. Article NN is from, again, the planning board. This is stormwater and land disturbance bylaw amendments. And Article OO is the temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana retailers. Article PP is the radio operability improvement project from the police and fire departments. This is to upgrade our repeater system in town, long overdue. This is one of the projects that we submitted to the Commonwealth for funding. So we're going at it in 2 different directions, and whichever one comes up first will get funded.
Can you go back to OO?
Sure.
Why do we need to do that again?
Yeah.
Is that something Kate decided?
Well, I mean, it's coming from her. I know that much. So we are deleting section 8 from the temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana retailers.
Okay.
Okay, and
Jeff, I believe there was a planning board vote a couple weeks ago
yeah,
supporting the removal of this temporary moratorium.
there was.
And so it's defunct language because I don't remember the specifics right now, but the planning board discussed this and voted to remove this from the bylaws because of the temporary aspect of it.
Right, and the actions
And
at the
because-
special
right.
town meeting in October of 2018 prohibit marijuana retailers in all zoning districts.
So maybe it's worth just
So this
looking
is
at the
gonna get
planning board
cleaned
vote.
Yeah, it's cleaning it up,
Yeah.
the language.
Okay.
It's convoluted.
So is mine.
Article QQ is coming from the petitioners. I had a discussion actually today with them about this, and they would like to come onto your agenda on April 16th, I think it is,
All right.
to present their article, and that's the last article. That I
That
have.
has to do with the,
So we're getting there.
restrictions of sales of animals, puppies. and so
Sure, yep. I'll just direct you to nearly the last page of this draft warrant is, I've taken the liberty of deleting some articles that are sort of in the hopper, but probably will have to get deferred until October, because they're just not ready for
One of them being the septic.
Yes,
Yeah, that's not gonna be.
they're just
ready.
not ready for prime time yet.
No, they're not, yeah, which is too bad,
Well,
but it is what it is.
Jeff, two things here. The first one there that you've struck out, struck through, fund emergency disaster fund with marijuana revenues. If I remember correctly, that's actually Article KK, so it's actually still in the warrant, which is fine by me, but that the host community agreement stabilization fund was to, in part, potentially fund emergency disaster
Yep.
relief. And then the second to last one there that struck out, the 9 Green Street demolition.
Yeah,
9 Green Street Committee is meeting on March 17th, and we should have a preliminary report by the LSP, from the LSP, which may actually, we'll see, but it may elevate that article, needing it to be in May,
Oh.
not in, we may have a definitive answer that could, I'm being hypothetical here, but could make 9 Green Street demolition something that potentially is ready for a decision in May as opposed to October. So if I could just kind of highlight that
Sure.
one as, could I
Yep.
provide an update after
Yeah.
the March
Yeah.
17th meeting?
I'm just frightened about the costs, because it's not only demolition,
Mm-hmm,
it's also
Remediation.
remediation. You gotta remediate the site before you can demo it, then you gotta demo it,
Yeah, so
and
that's
then you
a,
gotta recreate
Yeah,
the
sure.
site.
that is
So it's
going
gonna
to
be
be
a
on the
big number.
agenda, right, we'll be talking about that at that March 17th meeting. So I can
Good.
provide an update and then we could consider this again. And then articles that I'm just looking for, but maybe not seeing here, again, the Traffic Advisory Committee equipment requests. We meet next Wednesday, so I can see updating the board on Monday, the 23rd, after the Traffic Advisory Committee meets with a potential article. So if that's not amongst these 54, I could see that being a possibility. And then I wanted to ask about the trash, expansion of the trash program. That is not in this warrant okay. And then the senior center repairs, I know there are a
It's in
couple
there.
different, it is, okay, great.
It is.
But the
Okay.
question with that, FF, is, are they going to be paid for in another way, Ben, or should we keep this article for the senior center improvement?
I haven't seen it, so I can't speak to what it actually says.
It was
But I
what
think
they
the only
asked
thing is-
for in October and didn't get.
But how is it funded?
In this case,
This
it's.
is the money you guys get parked in free cash this year. This is part of the $200,000 in FY '20.
Yes. I guess I'm just asking, are you saying just transfer from free cash?
No. What we need to find out is, does the finance committee still intend to use funds from that appropriation in FY '20 to offset those expenses? Because if they don't, for whatever reason, they need to have an article
We need to have
for
the
FY
article.
'21.
But if we don't have to have an article, then it would be good.
Let me find out.
You got
And-
it.
Because then we can strike it. You know?
I'll find out.
There was a
Okay.
third piece too. This article was worded differently and was on that request that went to Karen Spilka and Carolyn Dyke's offices. So I don't know,
I don't know
Yeah.
if we'll get it, but we
Right.
want to make sure there's funding in place to get this done.
I think one of the things, I think, if I remember correctly, there were pieces of that, quote that was given to the finance committee that included some things that needed to be fixed quicker, like, I think it was ceiling tiles, or
That
there
were
was
fire
something
retardant.
particular.
yeah.
I don't remember, so I can't remember exactly. And one of the thoughts was that I think people wanted that broken out, because something that was, it sounded like it needed to have more immediate attention, than some of the other repairs with like cabinets and things like that, which aren't bad, it's just that I think that there would be a more, like, it would probably even be before town meeting, we could say.
Are you the liaison to the senior center?
No, I am not.
Okay, well, whatever those concerns are, I would recommend your board's liaison, let the senior center people know that. Again, we just gotta lock up if it's 20 or 21.
I will, yeah.
Traffic cop that thing, that's
Yep.
all.
All right, thank you.
Mr.
Yes.
Kitchen ceiling tile project is half done,
Oh, okay, so
just got half more to finish.
where did those funds come from?
It was a lot cheaper doing it in-house.
Oh,
Yeah, the funds came from the building's budget.
Oh, okay. So this needs to be cleaned up then, because we wouldn't need this amount anymore.
Could be a lesser amount. We
Or at
also,
all.
Or also, can you find out with the senior center what's what and what's left, and
Yeah, we'll find out.
then we can, okay, great.
A couple of things, Jeff.
oh, yes, sir.
I saw some email traffic. I didn't pay a lot of attention to the details from our friends dealing with the cable TV issue with Verizon.
Yep.
Is there any legal matter looming through that process that might need entry into the warrant?
I asked him that today, as a matter of fact, and he said not at this time,
Okay.
just a vote of the board.
And then the other question is the aggregation of funds to pay for the sustainability contract in FY '21. I think you were gonna talk to the town accountant about some kind of a mechanism to pool said resources, or a tool, right?
Yep.
To kind of capture it and then pay.
Yep. We're still working on that one. We don't have an answer.
But if it's,
Mhm.
it should be considered as an article until it's not, I think, because you're gonna need some authorization for that.
Yep.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
We had said last week we wanted on the agenda to talk about a governance committee.
I haven't had time to do that.
Okay, because I didn't see it on here.
Oh, you want to create it at town meeting? Is that what you're saying? You want an
Well,
article for town meeting to
we've
create
gotta-
a governance committee?
In order to discuss it or form one, it's got to be on our agenda. Is what-
Right, because you did that during,
Yeah, new
Other
business, I had
business, yeah.
Yeah,
suggested we
yeah.
form one, it was going to be on this.
Well, do you
week's-
want it on your agenda, or do you want it on the
Yes.
warrant for town
I
meeting?
want it on our agenda.
Oh, that's fine. I'll take care
So
of
that
it.
we can discuss it and vote on
Activate
it.
it,
And
yeah.
activate it.
Yep.
Okay.
good catch.
And as far as the traffic rules and regulations go, you wanted to table that for now, you said?
I will provide an update after we meet
And you'll
on
get
March.
more info.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay. So, you want to read that next one, donation?
Donation, the police department has received a gift of $582.29 from Mr. Aronian for grounds improvement. Copy of the acceptance form is in the agenda backup file. Make a motion to accept the gift on behalf of the police department.
It is what's left in my campaign fund account when I ran, and I
Really not running the agenda.
needed to dissolve it, and I thought, what a great opportunity to do something
I'll
nice.
take a motion to accept the gift.
Second?
All those in favor, aye. All
Aye.
those abstaining.
Abstaining.
You got that, Jeff?
Nope.
All right,
We'll move on.
we'll wait for Mr. Ritter so he can catch up.
So we had a vote to approve the donation.
Yep.
Ms. Hine and I, Mr. Aronian abstaining.
Okay. There's an event permit for the Holliston class of 2020, and Friends of the Holliston K-9 have put together an event to be held on March 12th at 6:30 for Designer R Bingo. They are seeking an event permit as well as a liquor license.
Move to accept both the event permit and the liquor license for the Holliston Class of 2020 and Friends of the Holliston K-9 group for March 12th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m.
And it's a one-day alcohol beverage license. Do we have a second?
Question,
Yes.
where is this event to be held?
Christ the King Church. Actually, I saw the flyer right in.
Christ the King Lutheran Church?
Just want to make sure it wasn't up at Town Hall, that's all.
Yeah.
No.
Second.
All those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Any other business?
Yes.
Did you vote on your two items?
They did.
Okay.
And the funny thing is, I think, I understood the permit was already approved.
Oh.
Well, it's approved twice now.
Woo-hoo. So good.
Give a couple items, or you good?
I have two, yeah, but you.
But if not, then great.
All right.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Here goes. I have two items that I'd like to bring up. One is that, if possible, I'd like to call for an update to budget guidelines from the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee Chair has said since the beginning of January, when they were first issued, that the original 1% guideline is a preliminary recommendation. There have been some changes since that time, since it's been issued. The guideline, that is, the budget's,
Yep.
the governor's
Okay.
budget was released on January 22nd with revenue projections that could quite possibly, I believe, are different from what was in the original 1%. And additionally, the select board's approved 25 budgets to date for a total of $22 million, which represents a 1.7% increase over fiscal year 20. So when our town administrator returns, I'd like to discuss the possibility of directing, or asking, I should say, the Finance Committee to update that budget guideline. I know it's not past practice. I know that a mid-season budget, or mid-budget season update rather, is not past practice, but I believe it'll help the select board prepare an appropriate warrant rather, for town meeting. I also believe the information would be valuable for ongoing union negotiations. That's my belief.
Did you get that, Jeff?
Yep.
Okay.
So I bring that up for discussion.
Comment?
Not at this time. I think I know what the answer is going to be. You know, that they're in the middle of putting the budget together. They're not going to change course, but it was a very conservative directive, and I think it was directed that way for a couple of reasons. The first is to set aside some amount of money for potential collective bargaining impacts, both at the school, DPW, and HBD. And as always, the uncertainty of where revenues are going. But you know, if you read the paper, the Globe yesterday, I mean, the state revenues are churning and hitting benchmarks they've never seen before. So the state is doing quite well with revenue collection. I don't expect this House and Senate, notwithstanding the latest stock market dives we've seen, to change course, but anything's possible. I just think that at this point they're probably going to stay course with the 1%, Tina. But I did observe that the schools approved a budget that greatly exceeded the 1%, and I think that that's not unusual. That happens every year. But you know, as a selectman on this board, I get my attention gets very heightened when I see what might appear to be different rules for different games. So I want to make sure that the Finance Committee's deliberations on the school budgets reflect the kind of core distinctions of, you know, minimal funding. I understand that the schools, for example, supported new initiatives and so forth. That was not really enabled during the 1% exercise that the executive board departments went through. Everybody's adhering to it for the most part, and I'd like to see that those rules play out with the Finance Committee in this realm as well. I want to just make a comment very quickly. It's my opinion. It's just my opinion. And one of the reasons we had to go through the exercise of correcting the department head salaries a couple of years ago was because it took years for those salaries to be so out of whack with the market, and the task of correcting them cost the town some funding to bring them up to market conditions. And the conditions really exist year after year when you've got executive branch budget growth being minimized while other budgets are not. They're optimized in some cases. And that kind of thing has to stop. You know, you have to see some balance, and I challenge the Finance Committee to find that balance this and every year to make sure that everybody's playing by the same rules. Right. So I think you understand what I'm saying, Mr. Sparrow. I'll be attending your meeting Thursday night. I don't know. The schools aren't coming in Thursday, are they?
No, they're in next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
And
I've been around for a long time, so I know how this goes, and I know how your budget, you know, how your committee looks at the school budget. Fairness is fairness, though. I mean, as Ms. Hine indicated, the town departments have towed the line. You know, we're hitting budget guidelines, and department heads are not seeing increases next year at all. So I want to find out, what are the schools doing? Are principals getting an increase next year? Are administrators getting increases next year? That's the sort of thing I'm going to be watching for.
I mean, I think in addition to department heads, we also have the non-unionized town hall employees who also saw 1%, unless they had a step increase. They were seeing a 1% or less as well. And I think, you know, they're underrepresented in the process as I've seen it played out so far. So I guess I thought it would be a fair thing to ask for, like it would kind of allow the conversation to be, well, okay.
You know, I just
Do I
don't know
ask
if there's
Ben
going
or
to be
do
a
I
lot
ask
of
Jeff?
change in midstream. So.
Okay.
And it
All
should
right.
be noted that the town hall budget will not be within the 1% guideline because of all the
Select board
professional
stuff.
fees and things that we have no control over. But our budget's very small to begin with. So.
Understood.
Right. The second thing that I wanted to bring up was after following what did we call it last week? We called it the tri-board meeting that we said we would talk about strategic planning, meeting and an agenda for that. We can postpone it, but I wanted to, I'll just keep it on my to-do list at each meeting that we are considering the type of agenda items. I believe each committee board was tasked with coming up with 3 agenda items, so if not prepared to talk about that tonight, that's fine. Would you like to see it as an agenda item for next week?
Yes,
or
yes,
yeah?
next week
Okay.
would be good.
All right, that's all I had.
And there's some other things, notification for a dangerous dog hearing for an incident that occurred in February in Shaw Farm Road.
That's
Well,
coming up.
That's coming
We
up.
don't
You'll
have
get
a-
us
We
information
don't even
on
have a
that.
date on that yet.
And there's a new license for crafted beer, I believe, that was recently approved.
Right, the state legislature approved that license.
Okay, good. So
Yep.
we'll sign it.
Do we
All
take a
right.
vote on that this evening, or?
It's,
I don't think,
I think.
no, I don't think so,
I don't
because
think
you've
we
already,
do. We
it's already been
already
approved.
approved
it was a town meeting vote that went on to the
Correct.
Will you notify Ken Onufray of Crafted? How does he know that he has a new license? And,
I can ask Andrea to do that.
okay, great.
All right.
Real quickly, was the town hall septic issue removed from the warrant, Jeff?
Yes, well, it is for now.
Yeah, we need more information.
We need to develop the easement language,
We
and
gotta-
there's a lot
yeah.
more work to be done on that.
Got it.
October.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you and good night, everyone. Thank you for watching.